The Alabama Crimson Tide rolls into Camp Randall Stadium. Can the Badgers get the big upset? Hello, everybody. You're listening to the College Sports Superfan, and let's get right into this matchup where it's a top five team going on the road for a potential trap game against the Wisconsin Badgers. Originally, I wasn't going to talk about this one because I like to talk about games that I think are going to be very close. And the spread for this game is 16 and a half. Alabama is 16 and a half point favorites. And I kind of like to talk about games where it's at least within two touchdowns or less. But I personally disagree with the spread. I think it should be a bit closer based on how Alabama played against University of Southern Florida this past week. Alabama, for the second straight year, struggled against USF. Now, they came away with a victory both times these last couple of years, but at the end of the day, they struggled. Maybe it's just the fact that Alex Golesh, who was the former Tennessee offensive coordinator who helped beat Alabama back in 2022, maybe it's just the fact that he's now at USF and he's kind of got something figured out. But whatever the issue is, they've struggled against the Bulls for the last 2 years. And you look at the score between Alabama and USF, and you say, oh, that game wasn't close. That was a blowout. Alabama dominated that game. That's actually not true. They struggled and were in a one possession game with the Southern Florida Bulls all the way down to the last 6 minutes of the game. But then Alabama scored three touchdowns in the last 6 minutes to run up the score and make it look like it was more of an impressive victory, hence why they're still number four in the country. But in reality, you actually saw that game. If you were an Alabama fan, you were frustrated because that was much closer than it should have been. Now you're going on the road in what should be a raucous environment in Camp Randall Stadium for Big Noon kickoff. Here's the problem with Wisconsin, though. There's a lot of concerns with the Badgers this season. The main concern is their offense. It has been mediocre, let's just say. It has not been the greatest. They've played two relatively cupcake opponents in Western Michigan and then South Dakota. And against Western Michigan, they only had 28 points. And you're thinking, okay, well, next week they got South Dakota, and South Dakota is a decent team, but they're an FCS team, so they should run up the score a bit more, right? Nope. Same thing. 28 points against Western Michigan, 27 points against South Dakota. Tyler Van Dyke, who is a veteran, experienced senior quarterback, has only thrown for one touchdown pass. And you look at the roster, I've looked at their depth chart. They've only got a few other quarterbacks on their depth chart. I think three out of the other four are freshmen, and there just really isn't much there. I mean, Van Dyke is basically their only option at quarterback, so they got to keep rolling with him. It's not like Florida where they had Graham Mertz and then they threw DJ Lagway in, who was a five-star, incredible freshman quarterback. Wisconsin just doesn't have that at that quarterback position. So if Van Dyke can't get it together, then it's going to be a long season on offense, and that's exactly what it's looking like. And typically with Wisconsin, the running game is amazing. They've had some of the best running backs in college football history, and over the last few years, their ground game has been incredible. But it's struggled. I don't get it. It's struggled big time. They brought in Tawee Walker from Oklahoma, and he's hardly been able to do anything. And then Ches Malusi, a former Clemson running back, he's been solid. He's got three rushing touchdowns, but he's not blowing anybody away or anything with his incredible talent either, like previous Wisconsin running backs. So the ground game is not making up for the weak passing game, and this offense has been a struggle to watch so far. Meanwhile, Alabama has Heisman Trophy candidate Jalen Milroe, who already has 9 touchdowns this season in 2 games. 9 touchdowns, five passing touchdowns, and four rushing touchdowns. And he's just one of the scariest and most dominant players in all of college football once again this season. Here's why this is a major trap game, though, for Alabama. Their next opponent is number one Georgia, who's going to be coming to Tuscaloosa. I will say, though, Fortunately, Alabama has a bye week in between. So if it was the very next week, this would be even more concerning. But fortunately for the Crimson Tide, that game against Georgia comes in week 5 and not in week 4 because they have a bye week right before, which works out perfectly for them. So let me get into my two big concerns for the teams and then what I think is going to happen in this game. My biggest concern for Wisconsin, as I just said, is the offense. Tyler Van Dyke has not developed as he should, and this Alabama defense has been really, really good. Obviously, they had a shutout against Western Kentucky, and the Hilltoppers have been known to have some really good offenses. So to get a shutout against WKU was actually more impressive than a lot of people may think. And then against Southern Florida, the defense is what kept them in the game all the way up until the end, until finally the offense figured it out in the last 6 minutes. But the defense was actually the what won them the game against Southern Florida, in my opinion. So that's very concerning for Wisconsin. My biggest concern for Alabama, though, is Milroe's been incredible, but the players that he has relied on the most so far are very young and inexperienced guys. Gone is Jermaine Burton, right, off to the NFL. Gone is Isaiah Bond, who's off to Texas and doing his thing with the Longhorns. The veteran playmakers are not there for Alabama, and Jalen Milroe is finding himself relying very heavily on true freshman Ryan Williams, who's been a superstar. He was a 5-star recruit from Sarland, Alabama. But he's relying way too much on these younger guys, and now they're going up against the toughest defense by far that they've played in their young careers, a defense that could potentially shut them down. So, what do I think is going to happen? Ultimately, I think Alabama is going to get into a defensive battle with Wisconsin. It may be close for a little while, but I ultimately think the Crimson Tide will pull away and end up winning this game by 10. The Badgers' offense, I just don't think is going to get much going. I really don't think they're going to score more than 10 points, honestly. I don't think they're going to score more than 10 points unless they get a defensive touchdown of some kind or a safety or something like that. I don't think the offense is going to score more than 10 points. That being said, I think Alabama's just got to score 3 touchdowns, call it a day. They'll end up winning this game by 10 at least. All right, thank you guys so much for listening to the College Sports Superfan. We've got lots of other exciting games coming up for week 3, so stay tuned for those, including the Bun Lee Game of the Week coming up later in this week. Thank you guys so much for listening.